It's the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Tune in. Tune in. Tune in. Tune in.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this session. I am Stephanie Assi. I'm a real estate investor. I currently live in the DC area. However, I do invest out of state. I'm a software developer by trade, so that has been my career path. However, investing has always been on my mind ever since I started, and I have been investing since 2013. So today I'm here to show my strategy when it comes to analyzing rental properties. Now, many people can have several property types or have a huge portfolio. However, if that portfolio is not returning a profit, is not cash flowing, or you're not really making money from it, then it doesn't make sense, right? So we want to buy. The reason why we're attracted to real estate is because of the income, because of the profit. So analyzing properties before even putting in an offer is extremely important to make sure that you're making the right decision, because when it comes to real estate, these are not um, a type of investment that you can easily liquidate if something goes wrong. It's a lengthy transaction, and it's just going through all of that to realize at the end that you did not make the right call is not something we want to encourage in the community. So analyzing rental properties should be one of your first metrics when it comes to making a decision. And I want to go over three key points that we will be learning today that go into the analyzing process. If you have any questions, feel free to write down in the chat, or we can probably kind of pause. I'll try to pause after a couple of slides and check in with everyone. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about when it comes to analyzing properties is the 1% rule. Now, what investors in real estate realm call the 1% rule is just a simple rule that says, you know what, at first glance, when you're looking at a property, a listing on the MLS, on Zillow, or whatever, and you look at the purchase price, if the rental, so what you can potentially rent the house for or the property for, should be at least 1% of the purchase price before you even go further, right? So this is a good way to eliminate the noise. So let's say a property is listed for $300,000, and you see that it's potentially renting for $1,000 or $2,000. So that's way below the 1% rule, meaning it's possibly not gonna cash flow, right? So this is a good way to weed out the properties that you know for sure there's no point even going further looking at details. So that is a good first level. It's not the only metric to use, it's just a good elimination strategy to save time. So every time I look, if I'm looking for a buy and hold property, so now this is different. If you're looking to renovate some properties and whatnot, the strategies will be different. Here, for the purpose of today, we will focus on properties that we want to buy and hold for a long time and rent out to tenants. Again, the 1% rule. So you're looking at the purchase price, you're looking at what it rents for. And how do we see what it rents for? Let's look at a few examples here. Let's head over to Zillow and look at some examples. So let me just get out of this presentation mode. Okay, here we are. So let's quickly look on Zillow, and let me search for a particular address. A lot of people like Atlanta, so let me just look at Atlanta. We're gonna pick 2 or 3 properties in the Atlanta area and just look. Okay, so house for sale here. Let's look at this very first one. It's only been listed for 1 day. It is listed for $325,000. And, they attach the pictures. Okay, great. Now, at this point, we're like, okay, how do we know this is a good deal? This is even worth looking through. So what I do is I scroll all the way down where there is an estimate of the rent. Now, some properties do have that and others do not. Let me show you right here. So there's a price history on Zillow, which is a very useful tool where you can see historically what the property was being rented out for, right? So here we see in 2018, it was renting for $1,100, but let's look at the latest one, right? January of this year, it was rented or potentially rented for $1,500, right? So we see that if we wanted to apply the 1% rule here, we would be looking at a rent of $3,200 or more, but at least $3,200, which is the 1%. Right? Here we see that it is not the case. This property was recently rented for $1,500, so this is way below our 1% rule. We know for sure this is not going to cash flow. It doesn't matter what you do to it; it's just not going to cash flow right away. Unless you add additional rooms or bathrooms or do a short-term rental, but for the purpose of buying and holding and renting to long-term tenants, this would not be the type of property that would cash flow right off the gate. So this is a good way to eliminate it. Zillow has this great price history tool. Outside of the price history tool, if you scroll down here, you can actually see the rent estimate as well. So even if the potential historic rent has not been listed, you can see the rental value in Zillow for certain properties, right? So here, this does match what they listed for back in January. Again, the 1% of 300K would have been 3,000 for it to get our attention. Because this is below 3,000, or rather because it's renting below 3,000, we don't want to waste our time. We're moving on. Let's go ahead and look at another property. Let's use another market. So this was Georgia. Let's go to, say, Arizona. Give me a city in Arizona. Let me think. Sedona, for example. Okay. Let's look at some properties. Ooh, this definitely will not. Cash flow. Okay. So I do want to take an example of something that will cash flow. Okay. So this is definitely, I can tell already from the price because there's no way no one is paying 5,000 in rent. So for the purpose of buying and holding, this will not be a great example because the rent is only $2,000 a month. So let me look at a market where we can actually find some cash flowing properties. Let me look at Alabama, Birmingham. Okay, so let's look at this house right here. This is the first search result, listed at $54,000, right? It has all the home details, square footage. Again, we ignore all the noise. I usually scroll down to have the estimate. Again, the rental history is just an estimate. Obviously, before you pull the trigger, you would want to verify that information with a property manager that's local to that area. However, at least before you even move forward, before you contact your agent and have them run around and show you the property, make sure it meets these some of these metrics. So here we have a property listed at 54,000. According to the our 1% rule, we would want it to rent for 540 or more. And guess what? It does rent for more potentially, does rent for more than the 540. This is estimated to rent at 750. So this meets our 1% rule. Again, see how we looked at 3 different markets. 2 initial markets properties didn't look like they would be cash flowing. Here we have something that's way over the 1% rule. Amazing. So at this point, now you can start looking at the tax records. You can start looking at other parameters that you need to verify for yourself, which I'm going to move over to now. So let's go. So we spoke about the 1% rule, and just quickly here, I have put together just a little explanation of what it is. So again, like I said, you take the purchase price and the rental income. So in order for a property to yield positive cash flow, the monthly rent should be equal or greater than the 1% of the price. That's what we just talked about. We looked at some examples on Zillow. Again, like I said, this is a great tool to pre-select or kind of vet the properties that you don't want to waste your time on. It's not the only metric to take into account. Now let's talk about cash flow, because it gets thrown around. I think I've used it like 20 times already so far.
It's definitely
What really?
we had just a couple questions.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yes, no worries. So well, the first one was like for me. Um,
Yeah.
so we have two. The first one, are there any exceptions to the 1% rule in your opinion, or do you think it's pretty standard? Like if for someone who wants to buy and hold in cash flow.
Mhm. There are some exceptions. That's a great question. There are some exceptions. Actually, one of my properties did not meet the 1% rule. And now when it comes to exception, in my case, it was related to the neighborhood. So based on the neighborhood type, certain properties would actually be a good investment, even though they don't meet the 1% rule. One of my properties located in a neighborhood, which is like with properties are more expensive, but you get good quality tenant. I would say better quality tenant than you would find in say C or B minus. So I was okay moving forward with that property because I knew, what, it's located in a prime area. It's pretty much white collar jobs, right? It's not, it's like doctors, lawyers renting for like a long term. Some of them go ahead and buy, or others because they're traveling nurses to move around, but they just needed like a stable place. So based on what you're really looking to do with the property, it may or may not be, I would say, that's why I emphasize that it shouldn't be the only thing to take into consideration, because there are some properties that don't meet the 1% rule, but they're going to appreciate so much in value that you can overlook that 1% easily. So it really depends on the strategy, depends on the market, and how bad you really want the monthly income, right? If you're okay foregoing, an extra 100 or two a month for something that's gonna appreciate more long term, then that's that personal decision. But
Awesome.
that's a great question.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Javin's question, what are your favorite markets to search and buy rental properties in currently? I'm assuming these markets all meet the 1% rule.
Yeah. Okay. So Alabama is one of them. There's actually a town, I need to remember, but Alabama is pretty hot right now. Actually, it's hard to even find properties because they just get bought. Like people go and buy for blocks. Just like you saw earlier, Jasmine, like that house was listed for 50,000. Like how cheap can you be, right? For 3 bedrooms, one bath. Um, Alabama is great. Tennessee is great. So I'm invested in Memphis, Knoxville. I think that's about 3, 4 hours away from Memphis, which is a great market as well. Nashville, great appreciating market. And then you also have St. Louis and Kansas City over in Missouri. So Missouri, St. Louis, Kansas City, great. You have Ohio, which is also another one of my favorites. Cleveland, I think there's Dayton. There's so many cities in Ohio that have properties that meet this 1% rule. A lot of properties that meet this 1% rule. Where else? I think even places like in the Dakotas, but I don't go that far just because the market size is much smaller. I tend to prefer bigger markets. So small towns I try not to do. But yeah, these cities that even Atlanta or the Georgia, Atlanta metro area, you can find it's getting expensive. You can still scavenge and find some hidden gems. Is that is
Oh yeah,
that
yep. That's all the questions for now.
okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so let's talk about cash flow and how to calculate cash flow. Okay. Uh, Now, there's the right way and there's the wrong way. A lot of people actually miscalculate their cash flow because they leave out some important expenses, right? A lot of times when people want to make a decision on a property, they will look at, like we did, how much you can rent for, and they look at their mortgage. It's like, okay, the mortgage is $1,000 and the rent is $1,500, so my profit is $500. Great, this is a good investment. Let's go. However, there are other expenses that need to be taken into account when calculating that. And the good thing is, for my personal experience, I have a calculator that I use that I'm going to show shortly, that makes it super easy to estimate your real cash flow, right? So what really is cash flow is the difference between your income and your expenses. It's very simple. So in terms of income, that's your rent, or that's anything that you receive from your property. So if you're renting, say, a basement, an upper unit, you have a storage, all those things. So when you collect the proceeds from that, that's your income. And then your expenses, that's everything that you spend. I mean, everything, not just your mortgage, other things too that you spend on the property, right? So when it comes to positive cash flow, obviously, is when your income is significantly higher or just higher than your expenses, and your cash flow is negative when you have more expenses than income coming in. Now, how do you really calculate your real cash flow? So you want to gather all your income and then gather all your expenses. Like I said, your expenses are not only composed of your mortgage. You have HOA fees or condo fees, you have insurance, you have taxes. You have the cost of running ads if you're advertising a vacant property, right? You're paying to put those ads everywhere. You're paying property management fees if you have a property manager. So all those things are expenses that you need to deduct from your potential income before you can see your real cash flow. There's also something called vacancy rate, repairs, potential repairs. So you're not going to have repairs every month, but you do need to factor that into your calculation so you can see like a projection, a real projection, right? So I put about 3% of my repairs into my cash flow calculator. So as I'm thinking 3% of the rent is gonna go toward repairs potentially, right? So let's talk about that. So let's look at some examples of those expenses. Yes, let's look at some example of those expenses. Okay, so I do want to open up my calculator right now. And I think in order to do so, I need to switch tabs. Okay, let's go. All right, great. So this is my rental property analyzer that I use to estimate my cash flow. So it has a list of all my operating income, right? So this is the rent that I get for the unit. Um, and potential losses or vacancy. So if the unit was empty for some time, I didn't make any money during that time, so I deduct that, right? In terms of operating expenses, my mouse is freezing. Okay. In terms of operating expenses, so like I listed before, you have the property management fees. So depending on what that looks like, my property managers charge 8% of the rent. So whatever 8% is, I write it down. And this is based on one of the units that rents for $850 a month. So that's what this calculation is based on. Repairs and maintenance. Again, I usually do 3% of my rent, right? That is allocated to repairs. So you can do less if you have a house that is relatively new. You're not gonna have as much repairs, so you can just put 1%. Then you have the taxes, you have the insurance. So some of these are actually in your escrow. So when your mortgage servicer, your loan servicer takes the mortgage, this is already bundled in, but I like to visualize and actually see what those are. So if you were to have an HOA, I don't have an HOA at this particular property. Utilities, the tenants pay utilities, so there's nothing here. Pest control, I don't do that. Accounting or legal. So if those are expenses that you personally have, definitely need to include it.
Hi everyone, Sam here from the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Make sure to hit that notification bell and that subscribe button and to visit us at blackrealestatedialogue.com.